this morning to wear my shirt just because, I'm either just, like being insulted or, I'm a glutton for punishment or, I just don't want to be a hypocrite, I just want to be, I want to support them. But, I've got a lot of experience in this. So last week, we weren't here. We were at Oxford, Mississippi, with the family at an Ole Miss Kentucky game. If you know anything about the Ole Miss Kentucky game, Ole Miss lost, and they were supposed to win, and that was a problem. And and so when I was walking, of course, I wore my Mizzou gear and everything to the Ole Miss game because it's my team, right? And so people were like, hey, yeah, all right, happy, whatever. And so, but Ole Miss is one of those teams, a lot like Missouri, that no matter what, no matter how good you're supposed to be, no matter what you look like on paper, all that, no matter what, we're always going to figure out a way to just not, really be there. We're going to figure out a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. I mean, we just can, we cannot handle prosperity as a football team. We just can't. And Ole Miss is kind of the same way. And, And really, I guess what gets me is that, again, I got my hopes up. I let them pull me in. Every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in. And that was a Godfather reference. All right, appreciate that. So Ole Miss kind of has that sort of feel to it, where it's like, you're just waiting for it to not be a good season. And so we were leaving last week, just walking out of the stadium or out of the place, and anyway, and so a couple of people, I said, hey, what's it, they saw me and they're like, what's it like being being a Mizzou fan, because they're all in Ole Miss gear, and I'm like, well, I said, it's all I've ever been, and they're like, well, is it any better, because they're like looking for a new team apparently because they just lost bad to Kentucky. He goes, is it better? And I'm like, well, it's kind of the same, I mean, that's, it's sort of the same, so. Anyway, so all right. Well, this morning in our class, Grant asked me to lead to do class this morning, and so kind of like last week, or not last week, the last time I did this with y'all's class, I don't know that I'm going to really teach a whole lot. I just kind of want to lead a discussion on or facilitate a discussion about what we do and why understanding, where we've come from and the church history and all that stuff, why that's so important. And, because I know that a lot of times we think about, what's the importance of going through all this? Why do we need to know what happened in the 14th century? Why do we need to know what happened here and there and all these different movements? And so my first question that I wanted to ask, well, I've got two questions, and so I'll ask them both, and then we'll discuss them separately. First question is, what do you think the main thing congregations, and I'll say this, I'll preface all this with, all the time Jesus was worried about what do people think? What are you hearing out there on the street? Jesus asks his disciples that all the time. Who do people say that I am? And he's asking the apostles a lot of times, what's the word on the street? What are you guys hearing out there? And I think that's important. Well, let me ask you this: why do you think, or why do we think that Jesus was so concerned with that? Because he's got his inner circle. So you think about it like this. So he's asking the church. Why would Jesus ask the church at that time, what's the word on the street? What do unchurched people, what do non-believers, what are you hearing out there? Why do you think that's so important for Jesus to know and then for us also to know? Why would he ask that? Just thoughts. And obviously I've had a lot more time to think about this question than you, so what do you think? Yes, ma'am. Hold on, Stevie. Got a hand raiser over here, rude. Go ahead. we can't seek and save the lost unless we're familiar with lost. I love that. It's like, why do lost people, why do people act lost? Because they're lost. What were you going to say, Steve?
Probably similar thing. We need to know what they're thinking so we know how to reach them.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Scripture says, out of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so it goes along with what they're saying.
I mean, so you'll know the heart of people, of what they're thinking. I love that. Understand. We have to understand what lost people are thinking. We have to understand what unchurched people are thinking. And if Jesus was standing here and said, "Hey, what are people saying about me?" What would the answer? What do we know? What those answers are? Yes, sir.
I think that question probably was designed to get the apostles thinking about the contrast between the world's view and their view of who Jesus is. Absolutely.
I agree. I think that there's a lot of, it's like the parables, and we're going to talk about more, in big church, is that, it's a lot of it's designed just to make us think, just to get us to think about, the contrast between, the difference in kingdoms and the behaviors within those kingdoms, how people in the kingdom of heaven are contrasted, and he says that, we are to be these shining stars, this little speck of light in this vast darkness. Absolutely. I think that there's what we can't get away from is that there seems to always be kind of this difference between what people think about Jesus or think about the kingdom of heaven versus what the truth is about Jesus or the truth of the kingdom of heaven. And so, going back to the question of what would people say, if Jesus asked us that question, hey, hey Matt, what are you hearing on that? What are people on the street saying? Who do people say that I am? Or what are some of the obstacles, the roadblocks that people have to, in their way to the kingdom? I mean, I think that's what he's asking. What are the confusions? What are the issues? What are we dealing with out there? And so, yes, sir.
It's a lack of knowledge.
Okay, I agree. I think it is. Or one of the biggest big hot button issue right now is a lot of it's misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation out there about Jesus, about the kingdom of heaven. And so if I ask you, what is some of that misinformation? What's tops on the list? Yes, ma'am.
Well, one of the things we hear so much is, I'm not against Christianity. Well, I think Jesus was wonderful. But then they'll proceed to tell you that he had no standards.
That he had what?
No standards.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus loved everyone, and therefore I and anybody else can act however they want.
Yeah.
And once again, misinformation.
Yeah, I mean the idea that that Jesus is all Jesus is all about love. Jesus loved everybody. Jesus accepted everybody, and I think that that's true to a degree. And I think that Jesus did love everybody and does love everybody and did accept and does accept everybody. But there are certain standards of that the kingdom of heaven promotes, that the kingdom of heaven provokes, that the kingdom of heaven creates. And so like Paul would say, grace is not without effect. Sanctification is the outcome of a kingdom of kingdom citizenry, kingdom citizenship. So what are some other what's other misinformation? Yes, ma'am.
On the complete other end of the spectrum of what Christiana said is that some people think there's no hope for them because of life they've lived so far. And it's dealing with that with my youngest daughter and her husband. My youngest daughter was brought up in the Church of Christ.
Mhm.
Something didn't take, but she and her husband think, you know, they're destined for hell.
Mm.
And I keep telling them that
They're destined for what?
hell.
Really?
They think because of the life they've lived so far, you know, that there is no forgiveness.
Mm.
And so what's the point?
Well, and so, and that's you get that a lot. You get that with, well, I'm too far gone. I'm this, I'm that. I could never be good enough. One of my favorite passages, interactions is John 4, woman at the well. I've clearly, a very, troubled, whatever lifestyle. And, Jesus, for all, and there was 1,000 roadblocks right there. But Jesus kind of goes through all of them and accepts her. But also, we have, go and sin no more. I mean, we hear, and I think that a lot of times we give that, we give that phrase a run for its money. Go and sin no more. We think, okay, well, now be good. Well, we don't do that. We didn't, when I came out of the water, I didn't go and sin no more. I went and sinned like usual, but that's not, I'm not proud of that or promoting that. I'm just saying, I think a lot of the times the misinformation is that, you gotta qualify, you gotta be good enough, you gotta be this, you gotta be that. And a lot of times, people, but then also, there is the psychology of sometimes we, latch onto something just to give us an excuse not to, and that sort of thing. But the one of the biggest obstacles to the kingdom of heaven that I've seen is the church itself, because it's full of people. People are broken. Other people are looking for a reason to, they're looking for an obstacle. They're looking for a roadblock or whatever. So the importance is for us to be, for the church to be as sincere and genuine as Jesus. That was the the point of his ministry, was to to show a genuine, a sincere love for mankind. And so I think a lot of times we as the church get hung up on a lot of the things that we've evolved into, and less into, and we get hung up less on the genuine, sincere love and caring for individuals. And so what I mean by that is, if you think about would you think is the number one cause of congregations to split and to form into different. And I think probably most people have either heard of, or in the Church of Christ, you've either heard of or been through a church split. Would that be an accurate statement? We've either heard of churches splitting or been a part of one. Why do congregations split?
Lack of love would be the bottom line.
Okay, I would not argue with that. Personalities? Do you think it typically, let me ask you this, do churches typically split because of what we're doing out there or what we're doing in here? Yeah. I mean, think about that for a second. I mean, we have people like, and not casting aspersions on anybody, just stating the truth. There are people that can no longer worship here because of us studying a book on hermeneutics. Even before we just got in, I mean, think about that for a second. Like, I can no longer sit next to Ken Longer and worship the true and living creator God of the universe because of what? I mean, do what? Well, that might be my fault because I might be bad luck. But no, I mean, think about that for a second. And we could come up, well, I mean, there was this church way back in the old building days. I mean, like what, 4 preachers ago? This church had folks get up and leave in the middle of a service because we were, at the time, I was even a thought, but it was, from my understanding, it was something to do with using drama during worship to make a point. Wasn't that something the Van Gilbert days? Something like that? I mean, we can just, and I'm not trying to stir up, dissent, but I'm just saying we could, if you go back and you think of all of the church, and I've been a part of a church back in my early days. We split over clapping. See, okay, I didn't mean to bring up. What were you saying, Matt?
I was working the door a few weeks ago, and a guy left here. He stopped me on the way out in the middle of service and said, "Well, I can't pray with everybody clapping and with you raising people up with the microphone and stuff." So he just walked me. I never saw him again. He's been here 3 or 4 weeks, and I tried to talk to him a little bit. It's one of those things. We should be able to allow things that there's things that happen all the time that I wouldn't personally want to do. Right? Like, and I can list them out, but nobody cares. And I don't care, really. It's not about me. It's not about any one of us. It's all of us. It's really God, right? And it's hard to, like, if we get on the kids for clapping, how many of those kids are going to come back when they have the opportunity to choose for themselves when they go?
Well, I mean, and it's just, what we get to is, and it's not necessarily, to me, it's not necessarily the activity, the clapping or the not clapping or the music or the not music or the, and this is, not trying to get, whether it's, women's roles or whatever. I mean, honestly, it is of no consequence to me. The issue is what information are we putting out there about the kingdom? What information are we putting out there? What do, and it's all, and so the other question is, why do we believe what we believe? So, what's the word on the street, and why do we think about this book the way that we do? Because you and I both know you can't swing a sack of dead possums in this town without hitting 14 different buildings just like this with different names out front, with different people that they can't worship with us and we can't worship with them because of something that we believe about the exact same book. And so that's why studying how we got here is so important. And one of the things that certain doctrines about this, that, or the other, I think to myself, when people, lock onto this doctrine or that doctrine, I think, and I have the luxury of have studied, a lot of and I will use a word that we hate, but a lot of the evolution of these doctrines within our fellowship. And I think to myself, if you knew who came up with that and what else they believed, you wouldn't believe what they said. I mean, because the doctrines that we have are, and I get it, guard your doctrine closely, and I'm all about that. One of the things, though, that I challenge myself with is when he talks about guard your doctrine closely, what doctrine is he talking about? He's talking about the doctrine of Jesus, of who Jesus is. Yes, Matt. But here's the debate, and here's the argument that we, that I would hit you with. I wouldn't, but if I was arguing with you, I would. But we've got to teach them the right way. See, that's the carry. So, but what is that? What is that the right way? Yes, ma'am.
I'd say for decades, I didn't hear the right way with love and grace. It was the rules.
Yes. And I was the kid who I wept. I mean, my parents, just so my parents were divorced when I was a little kid. I don't remember them ever being together, but I did have the visitate. We'd go to my dad's and whatever. And so and I grew up in the, my earliest was understanding the Church of Christ. And my dad, when he would go to church, and my great-grandmother, they went to the Baptist church, and they had music, and they had, this, whatever. I remember weeping to my mother about what are we going to do because, my father was going to hell because he went to church where there was music. I mean, I'm, a little 8-year-old kid just, because I'm so afraid of that. And, because that's what we grew up. And there's people, and that's the problem is that, people like, and from my point of view, that hold my point of view now, I have a hard time, loving, because that love goes all directions. And so people who have and Paul talks about this, he's like, people who have a different understanding of this stuff than you still got to love them, and you have to alter your behaviors in order not to make a problem with them. But they have to alter theirs. So there's all this community and all this love and all this getting along, and that has to happen, and that's where we struggle. That's where the church, not just the Church of Christ, although I think we're really better at the struggle than most. That was an insult, by the way. That's where we struggle. We struggle with keeping the main thing, which is what's our doctrine on Jesus? What is our doctrine on Jesus? And I'll tell you, this is why guarding your doctrine on Jesus is so important. Is anybody familiar with what? And I know we do not recognize the authority of the Pope, I have no problem with not recognizing that. I'm going to continue to not recognize that, just so in case you're wondering. But anybody hear what he came out and said? I think it was last week or week before last, or maybe earlier this week. That he officially has come out and said that all religions are just different avenues to the same God. Now Christiana is on board with me not recognizing the authority of the Pope. Right. Is that new? No. So yeah, I mean, and nobody. See, now that's doctrine worth arguing over. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so there are, so that's pivotal doctrine right there. That's pivotal doctrine. And so if you think about all of the things that separate us as fellowships within Christendom, and honestly, our understanding of the person and Savior of Jesus Christ is truly, I think, the only the only doctrine that we can 100% defend, and so as we go through and think about and talk about the history and all of the changes and evolutions and everything else, and this is going to get into a little bit of the sermon this morning. So I'll treat you guys kind of like the teenagers, because that's what we sort of talk about. And so this gets into the sermon, is that what are we doing in order to, A, get the right information about Jesus, not about our church, not about our congregation, but the right information about Jesus, and how are we allowing that, the correct information about Jesus, to affect us? So the sermon, we're talking about the parable of the shrewd manager. One of my favorites, because it's one of the most controversial. And those of you who have known me, and Ron's like, typical. The most controversial, that's what that cat's going to go for. But But no, I mean, because it's so weird. Guy's getting fired. Guy's a manager. He's getting fired. He's told you're getting fired, and so give me an account of the work that you've done. And so what he does is he goes and he slashes prices for all these people that are owing him money, and gets in good with all this because he's like, look, I can't lose my job. I'm gonna lose my job, and I can't. I'm too proud to beg, and I'm too I can't dig, and so what am I gonna do? So he slashes all the prices. He gets everybody on his side. Manager, the owner comes back and says, hey, see what you did there, and he commends him for cutting all these bills in half and in a third and all that, and so Jesus makes his comment. He says, people of the world are more savvy or more smart than people of the kingdom. People of the, and so he's kind of like commending this guy for being dishonest, or at least giving away so much. Well, I mean, is it his money to give away? Is it, so there's the arguments right there. Possibly. I mean, but that might be the reason he's getting fired. I mean, and there's so much that we don't know. And my question is, are we willing, and I love this, are we willing to kind of read between the lines and make up narratives in order to relate to the story? And I don't personally see a problem with that, because there's so much that's left out of these parables. There's so much that's just not there. Not in this parable. Do what? Well, he gets commended for, I think, his mentality is where we're gonna is this where I'm gonna go with it? Is that his mentality is whatever I'm gonna use whatever's at my disposal in order to ingratiate himself with others for the sake of relationships. For the sake of relationships. So we're going to talk about, what are we doing as people, to get in good with those who are outside and, outside the church in order to form relationships for the hope of saving some, right? And so, but one of the things that I think is, in the church that we could do better at, if we could get over some of the traditions and traditional understandings of things, is in the arena of innovation. If we as a congregation or as a church are more innovative with how we reach people, there's who was it? Louise Miller, Miss Malise. Some of y'all know Miss Louise Miller. Some of you don't. Her husband was a preacher for hundreds of years, and she was a dear lady. Now she lives in Oklahoma, I believe. And when Hyatt, my youngest son, was little, he just latched on to Miss Louise and loved her and would sit with her at church and would go over to her house after church and have lunch, and they would just chill. And when we moved away, when we went to Tennessee, she gave him one of the pillows from her couch that he just loved, because he would go over there and it's just this fuzzy little pillow, and he would take naps on her. Anyway, he just loved Miss Louise. Miss Malise is what he called her. And one time we were planning a something, I think a car wash or a trunk or treat, something like that. And that's something typically, like a fundraiser or those sort of things. For a long time, that was typically what other denominations did. We didn't do stuff like that. And somebody said to Miss Louise, she said, well, something about, we're just going to be Catholic now because that's what, fundraisers or something like that, because that's what the Catholics are doing. And Miss Louise, without missing a beat, said, well, I guess we're going to, when we come to church, we're going to have to crawl in through the windows because I hear the Catholics are using their front door. I thought, well, there you have it. So when it comes to like being innovative, what is our fear? What's our fear when it comes to being innovative with our outreach or even our gatherings? I mean, because like what Matt was saying is that, you know, we'll have people that just come in off the street. That's one thing I've always loved about this congregation. And when, you know, we just have people that just stop in. This is a very transient community. You know, if you think about it, not a lot of people are from here. A lot of people live here, but not from here. And so we'll just have people just come in off the street. Well, what do we do to make our message, you know, not palatable, but at least, you know, make people want to stop and listen, make people want to come back, and make people want to be, you know, and so the question then becomes, who are we trying to attract? Who are we trying to get to come here? Who are we targeting? And all of this, all of it is, you know, under the umbrella of church history, because, you know, the history of the church is how we got here, how we got to, you know, this model, and why we do what we do, and all that. And is what we do, is it working? Is it working? Are we being his witnesses? Are we getting the right information? Are we putting misinformation out there or not? Yes, sir.
I agree with all these things that you're saying, but one thing that I'm not hearing is there is an enemy, and he has always been active from the very beginning, and he is active today, and we need to realize that the people who do not believe in Jesus are influenced by Satan, and we need to love them in spite of the fact that they do not know Jesus.
Absolutely.
We have to love them.
100%.
Realize that they're under the influence of Satan.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that you know, we kind of miss on, is realizing, you know, what's at stake. You know, what's at stake for the people that we go to work with? What's at stake for the people that, you know, we live next to? I mean, I have a, you know, my across the street neighbor is a good dude, you know, but he's not a believer. And there's not a day, or, you know, especially there's not a week, and very few days that go by that I don't think about him and think about, you know, my previous interactions, my next interaction with, you know, how do I get across to him, you know, not, hey, come to church, but a relationship with God is important. A relationship with God is the only reason that this life happens, and I want to you know, get that across to him. And you're right, we are up against an enemy. You know, we are against, and it's not people, because Jesus says, you know, it's not against flesh and blood. It's against the, you know, the authorities, the rulers, principalities, all that. And we have to understand that, but also we have to understand that is in here. Now we have a little bit different relationship with the forces of evil, because we have, you know, the protection, you know, of the Holy Spirit, and there's certain, and I don't understand all of this, so I'll thank you not to ask me a lot of questions about it, but I do know that there are certain things that can't happen to us because of, you know, the indwelling of God's Holy Spirit. But we still have, you know, we still are encumbered by the flesh and all the fallings and failings and fallenness of being human, and that works on us and our image and the information that we're putting out. Because one of the things that you see, one of the most demonic things in the church is legalism, and that happens, you know, because that's in our nature to be, you know, to be controlling, and that's how we control our relationship with God. And those are barriers that we put up, is that you have to do X, Y, and Z in this way in order to qualify or to gain a relationship with God, and yada yada, and all that is a lot of traditions, a lot of evolution that has gotten us to those thought processes. But here's another controversial thing. Have you ever heard the story or the parable of the struggling homosexual? You ever heard Jesus' parable on the parable of the struggling homosexual? You missed that one?
Is it in there?
Well, sort of. I needed Ron in here for him to go, oh my gosh, what's this guy saying? Think about the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. Because and so tax collector doesn't mean anything to us. I mean, sort of, but you know what I mean. It's like, when Jesus said tax collector to a first century Palestinian person, they went to the worst of the worst. Well, so for us in the church, all of us fine folks in the church, what's the worst thing you could be? I mean, I don't know that it's homosexual, but that gets our attention. If you showed up, a lot of places have those flags that we put, and we've done them here where we got the little like marketing material flags out, say faith or hope or hey, come join us or welcome or free coffee or whatever. What if we had a rainbow flag out there? Woo, woo, woo. Now, I mean. No, but I'm saying why, but I mean, clearly we wouldn't promote that lifestyle. We would not do that. And the problem is I would want to put a rainbow flag out there to say, hey, you're welcome here. You are welcome. If you are a homosexual or whatever, all of the different lifestyles within that community. But you say you're welcome here. Now, I don't approve of or promote that lifestyle. But you know what else I don't approve of? Greed. You know what else I don't approve of? All the things that I do. All the things that Carl. Carl's a great guy. Seriously, if you don't know Carl, get to know him. He is a great guy. But the dude's not perfect. Well.
I have told those guys at work who say, yeah, but you're trying to get it perfect. No, stop. I'll say, there's only one that's been perfect. Everything else is accurate to a certain degree of tolerance. Now, how sloppy do you want your work to be?
Yeah, exactly. Okay?
You have to struggle with that to determine what's good enough.
Well, and so you think about this is that my righteousness is a direct reflection on my love for God, my love for Jesus.
There you go.
And so the more and that's why I'm big on the disciplines and I'm big on all, because, and I say this all the time is that, and the Church of Christ, attracts a type of formulaic thinker, typical, because that's, it just is what it is. And so we typically think, this plus this is that, 2 plus 2 equals 4. Well, the problem is no one's ever fallen in love with 4. No one's ever been just madly head over heels in love with the number 4. But you fall in love with Jesus. You get to know Jesus as a person, and there's a big fat difference. And so the more I am in love with Jesus, the more that I, and I study or just, honestly, just in His presence, pray, meditate, all those things, the more you get to know them. And the more you get to know Him, the more you want to do, it's just like any other relationship you're in. Vic and I have been married for 30 years. It'll be, 31 years. And I know if you ask her, she'll be like, is that all? Oh my goodness. It feels like so much longer. But the more the older we get and the more I get to know her and the deeper our relations, the better of a husband I want to be. I want to be a better husband for her, for this other person. And that's kind of like, so the way I act, the way I husband is a direct reflection on how much I love Vic. And so, we're not perfect. We don't espouse to be, but we're trying. We're just trying to love Jesus more. And one of the ways that we do that is through people, because there's nothing more important to Jesus than people. And so, anyway, we've only have like 30 seconds left, but and I apologize. The reason I have to keep putting my foot on the furniture is it really helps relieve my back in certain areas. So I apologize if I'm being rude. But so as we think about how we got here and all of the ways that we think about things, it's important for us to maintain the central doctrine of who is Jesus and how is the truth about Jesus affecting my life, and are we promoting what we believe that we are to do versus are we promoting what we believe we are to avoid? Because I think a lot of times people that we will focus on, and this is a big barrier for folks coming out of the world, we focus on behaviors to avoid. And what if we focused on behaviors to promote and what we should be doing? Now, because think about the parable of the guy who cleans his house all up. He's like, well, his house is all dirty. He got all these evil spirits in it, so he shoos all the evil spirits out, or he shoos the evil spirit out, and he cleans up his house. So he avoids those behaviors. And then the evil spirit comes back and says, oh, well, look at all this room I've got now for activities, all this room for activities. And he brings 7 of his friends, and the guy's worse off than he was. It's not about what we eliminate, it's what we add. If we're doing the righteousness, we don't have time or inclination or whatever to do the other things. And so, what we focus on as the body of Christ, it will largely determine what people outside of the body of Christ are thinking and saying. So, all right, well, we're a minute and a half late. That was a good thing to end on, and thank you for your attention and your discussion. I appreciate it. And as I tell the teens downstairs when I'm teaching, make sure you sit up straight and pay attention in big church. And they never do. That's what my mom called it all the time. She said, oh.